Hello, welcome everybody to this brand new session of our feature Bootcamp, which is going to take you from that idea to a finished first draft of a new feature script in just 8 weeks. My name is Connor, and I'm the host of these. I teach the Bootcamps and the weekly Writers Labs on Saturdays, and I'm going to be taking you from all the basics of basically how to write, how to plan, organize, and write a movie. This course is always the backbone of the Scriptcamp classes and our community, and this is sort of the 101 course in how to write a movie piece by piece. So if you have a background in this and you're coming back for another bootcamp, thanks for still being with us and continuing to apply the things that you've learned and write another script. And, every script that you write with these programs, you will be building on the skills that you built before. Or if you're brand new with us, this is a good place to just learn the fundamentals of what does it look like to plan and write a 90 to 120 page feature story. Let's go into it. So in case you're having mic issues, always just check that panel in the bottom left. That's going to be where your mic settings are. If you're not watching on Discord and you're watching on YouTube or something like that, you can come join us on Discord by going to our website, scriptcamp.net, and you can get the link to join our Discord server where you can interact in these live classes, in which we have over 70 hours of these live classes a month. So make sure to keep those mics muted by clicking that small gray microphone icon on Discord. And then when you need to unmute and speak aloud about your ideas or answer questions or things like that, you can click that again to make it disappear. And refer back to this slide later if you are having those audio issues. Just make sure to go to YouTube and rewind the stream to this point if you need some ideas. What is Scriptcamp? I've told you that we're the screenwriting community, so we have these free classes such as this one here, which is the first part of this longer course, and then we also have these paid events, classes, and workshops that are going to go much more in depth than these introductory courses will. So we have some paid VIP member classes. The Bootcamps and Writers Lab are all member benefits. I've been writing feature films for about 11, 12 years now, and I've been signed since 2017 as a pro writer in Hollywood, doing mostly rewrites for smaller horror thriller production companies. There's a little bit more about me there, but I have a thriller script set up at a major production company in town now, so my specialties are going to be horror, thriller, and action, but I do write a lot of different genres and have a lot of different interests. So here's what's coming up in Scriptcamp and what's new. So we have this is the first session of this bootcamp, which will be running for 8 weeks. And then once it's done, we will start a new one in the same time slot. The new time slot for features will be this one, Sunday, 11 to 1 p.m. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. So if you want to keep sticking with us and just keep doing features, you can just sort of mark out this date and this time on your calendar. And if you're looking to do TV, that's going to be Fridays, 5 to 7 o'clock Pacific time. That session just started, so if you're looking to write a pilot, it's not too late to join. We also have our Saturday 12 to 2 slot. You can find the short film bootcamp there now. So we're going into we're heading towards the third week of that bootcamp, second week of that bootcamp now. So that is going to be finished as of, it would be, I guess, 4 weeks after we started. That'll be done in time for the novel bootcamp, so by September 17th. Okay, so that's going to be done in mid-September. And then we're starting novel bootcamp after that, which is going to be also in that Saturday slot. 12 weeks to write a complete novel, so that should be really fun. And it's all brand new stuff with us, brand new guests, brand new courses, brand new instructions. So we're always adding new things and trying to, keep things fresh and interesting here. We have many other weekly events that you can see over here on the right, including writing groups, which we've added relatively recently, but you can come to these weekly meetings of between 1 and 2 hours for topics such as comedy, animation, horror, and we've just added fantasy, which we're having the first meeting of that group today at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So I think 5 to 7 is the total runtime of that one. But come by if you have the interest in those topics, or you can make your own group if you want to sort of start organizing and meeting people and just networking and finding partners to trade scripts with and trade feedback with, and all these really valuable things that are difficult to always find in your local community. So communities like this are here to act as a support system for you to be able to get notes and feedback, and to also start sharpening your skills in providing that feedback to others and just building that working relationship with other writers and people who are trying to do the same sort of stuff that you are. So there's a bunch of stuff there. Refer back to this slide if you want, but you can also just go to scriptcamp.net and go to schedule, and you can find our full calendar. Let's go into bootcamp. So these are 2-hour weekly meetings. Every week this will be 11 to 1 Pacific time, and it will run for these 8 weeks, and by the end you'll have the first draft of a script. You can see the runtimes for all the other bootcamp programs there, some of which are just recordings at this point and are not actively running, but you can always go back and watch those earlier ones if you want to in our video library, which is for members. How to enroll, scriptcamp.net/classes. And you can buy a course on its own, or you can start your unlimited free trial, which includes everything we do, and you get 2 full weeks of doing whatever you want on Scriptcamp. That is scriptcamp.net/membership, and you can, if you sign up for yearly, you will get 40% off, and it means you will just be paying $29 a month for full access to absolutely everything that we offer here. Over 70 hours of classes a month. That's like, a few dollars per class, if that. So if you plan to enroll but you haven't signed up yet, Nacho can drop a poll in the chat that you should be able to see. You can click that little number 1 in order to get instant access to all of our private chat channels, video library, and other great member benefits. All right, and there's just a breakdown of what you get with all the different membership options. The Unlimited is probably going to be the best value because that gives you access to whatever class, whatever bootcamp, whatever workshop you want, and includes Writers Labs, and also gives you $100 off any consultation or proofread that you're getting from us. And you can review all the other options there, or scriptcamp.net/membership. You can see all the benefits. So if you want to get feedback on your script, there's lots of ways to do that. It's not actually included in the class to get a full set of notes from me on your final product, but there's plenty of ways for you to trade or swap with other people. We have these script swaps on Tuesdays. We have table reads on Sundays, so that's later today at 2 o'clock. So lots of ways for you to get that feedback and to get responses from other writers around your level. And if you want to purchase a consultation from me, you can do so at scriptcamp.net/coverage. If you're a member, you'll get a large discount, but this is in no way required. You don't have to do this at all. All right, shall we look at the schedule for this class? We did week 0 last week. That was about just those basics of what is a logline, what is a feature, why are we writing this, how does feature writing work in America, and all of these great things that are going to just be foundational knowledge and skills for this career, because this whole program is based not only on how do you write a script. This is intended to put you on the path to being a professional writer in Hollywood. You're in a course that's being described as a boot camp, meaning that this is an intensive course that is supposed to result in a full feature in just 2 months of work. So this is quite a lot of work and quite a lot of, it's a commitment, and you should just be ready to stick with that and to try to meet the milestones of the class. But there's no grades, and it's okay if you fall behind. Like, there's no actual, enforcement of these deadlines. This is just to help you keep on track. And even if you don't finish that script, we at least hope to give you that boost or that push to being able to finish once the course is over. So just on your own account, within the next couple weeks after the course is done, hopefully, if you have not finished totally, you can wrap everything up. So week 1, why this story? So we're going to look at, so why are we picking this idea? How are we choosing which ideas that are going to be appropriate for, or best picks for a bootcamp course like this? And we're going to be filling out your sketchbooks, which you should have made last week if you were here, but if not, this week you'll be making Sketchbook and trying to finalize logline by the end of this class. Logline being that one single sentence expression of your movie's premise, which is going to act as both a guidepost to help help you navigate through your own story, and to keep everything straight in your mind and make sure you're not deviating too far from your initial goals. And also, it's going to be a useful tool to help you communicate to others what the story is, because people are more likely to read a script if it has a compelling logline that hooks them and brings them in, and is just acting as that first handshake between you and the reader that says, hey, this is worth your time and attention, you should check this out. That's why loglines are so important, and although it does get annoying to worry about them and to keep reworking them over and over again, it's once you have a solid logline that will act as that bridge between you and the reader to say, hey, I know you have hundreds of things to read, but this one is going to be worth it, you should check this out, and also it's going to help you stay on track too. So we'll work a lot on logline today, and you'll be filling out your sketchbook, and we'll just sort of be trying to nail down some of these fundamentals of what the movie is, what is the appeal of your genre, and what are you trying to actually accomplish, and why would somebody come to see something like this? Why this story? So from today, excuse me, we will go into next week outlining 1. So broad strokes is going to be that story beat summary, which is just a list of the major events of the story in the rough order that they happen in, but they don't need to be in an incredible amount of detail. Next week after that is outlining 2. That's scene cards, where you'll be expanding that story beats outline into a full paragraph for every scene, in which you will also denote which pages that will take place on in the script. So you'll be planning out what happens on every page of the story before you start. We don't actually go to pages, which means start writing, blocking, and writing scenes and writing dialogue and things until halfway through the program. That starts on week 4, which is going to be September the 11th, and from then on you're going to be writing 20 to 25 pages a week to try to finish within the deadline time. So this first half of class is all about planning and organizing to the extent that those pages will be easier to write, and you're not going to have to worry about what happens next. How do I get to that next moment? Because you will have front-loaded that work and thus organized your entire process so you have a comprehensive roadmap through the entire story. All right, week 4 is beginning. Week 5, transition from Act 1 to Act 2. Week 6, second act. Week 7, last part of second act. Week 8, third act, and ending. And you'll be finished by October 16th if you are following along with this class. So I want to just stop and see if we have any questions so far. Before we jump in, you can feel free to either type in our text chat, which you can find called, just mouse over where it says general chat, and you'll see a small white word bubble that says open chat on it, so click on that. You can bring up the text chat to type something, or you can feel free to unmute. What questions do you guys have before we get going?
I have a question, actually. Let's say today I'd like to learn how to become a writer for Hollywood. How long would it take me to actually get a job there from today?
Well, it's different for everyone. If you're just starting writing now, like you have no background in writing and this is the very first time that you're starting, the average is about 10 years before you will be able to have both the skills, the network, and the experience to start getting meetings or potential paid jobs in Hollywood. So I would say if you have some background already, it might be less than 10 years. If you already have maybe experience writing novels or plays, especially plays, or something like that, maybe it'll be less, maybe, 5 to 8 years. But I would expect if you're just getting going with screenwriting, no less than 5 to 10 years. Hope that answers that. But then again, you have to know everyone has different stories, and you never exactly know how things are going to go. Everyone learns at different speeds, and everyone has different amounts of luck and family circumstances. Some people have kids to take care of, some people have jobs, and like all these things will add a lot of variables in there. So just expect that it's not going to happen soon, and it's not going to be easy. And that's as long as you keep those things in mind and don't have this deadline in mind. You're like, I have to be a pro Hollywood writer by this time. Just allow the process, like learn to enjoy the process, and it will feel like it goes, a lot smoother. Thank you for the question, though. Other questions? All right, if there's no more questions, we'll go right ahead and look at the overview of this week 1 class. So this is an intro. This is week 1. We did intro last week, so we're getting right into the weeds of this here. If you weren't here last week, it's okay, but you'll have to just do a couple quick things to catch up, mostly just make that sketchbook and start adding stuff to it. So I'm going to go over that pretty early on just to make sure that you can be working on that throughout the class. This is an active and interactive class where you will be called upon to speak out loud about your ideas and to answer questions on the mic and to get lots of feedback. So always remember the skill of receiving lots of feedback. Getting lots of notes is not something we can ever get away from at any stage in this job, so you must learn to do it well. You must learn to do these things gracefully and to accept that maybe I don't know everything there's to know about this, and somebody with a lot of experience might be able to help me guide this into a more workable version of the story. I have done a lot of these courses and classes. I have written a lot of scripts. I know how to basically organize a feature story really well. So it might be a different method for you. It might be something you haven't tried before, but I recommend you just give it a try. Just go along with it for this course. If it doesn't work for you, you can change your method after and throw away anything that didn't work. But just try this method of organizing scripts and outlining scripts. I know it's very extensive, and it's more than a lot of people have done before, but it will take care of that heavy lifting early on and avoid a lot of those problems that come from not knowing what happens next in the story. So I really do emphasize this method of planning and outlining everything that happens on every page before you start. And if you haven't tried it before, I think it might work for you. So give it a good, solid shot. Today's class will be starting with just introductions and go to ground rules of the kinds of ideas that you should be trying to pick for your movie. We will look at loglines as well. So if you have a logline from last week that you've modified, or maybe you've been working on one that you're ready to share early on, we'll have a little time early to look at these updated ones from before. If you don't have a logline ready yet, that's okay. You can try to get it nailed down by next week as strong as you can. We'll talk about premise and just what is a movie idea, what kind of ideas are we looking for, how do we pick the right idea and make sure that we're not being too ambitious or picking an idea that's too small and doesn't really feel like a feature film. We'll look at high concept versus execution dependent, and generally as a course that is geared towards putting you on that road towards being a Hollywood feature writer. We are emphasizing high concept stories and ideas here, and that is like usually what you should be gravitating towards, I feel, as you're trying to learn this craft. If you want to be a director and direct everything yourself, or maybe one of these people that will star in the movie you make yourself, you know, like a Kevin Smith or a Donald Glover or someone like that, then execution dependent is going to be much more, it will be easier to pull off. And also, independent films just don't need to have super high concept premises in order to get funded, or things like this. So it's not actually required that you be writing a high concept story, but it is a good skill to have and be able to recognize what it means to write a high concept story. And if you want to write features for studios in Hollywood, you need to know this concept like the back of your hand. We'll look at how to fill out your sketchbook and what to put in it. I'll touch on that early on just because you can be working on that throughout class instead of, just listening in class. You can always be adding things to your own sketchbook, and even as you're listening, be typing an early draft of your logline or some ideas for characters or some ideas for scenes. Whatever is just going to help you get organized, so we will make that early on. We'll talk a little bit about theme and dramatic argument, though not way too much today, just because if you haven't written a bunch of movies before, your emphasis should be on how do I pick something I can write in 8 weeks, plan it, write it, and finish it. You shouldn't worry way too much about, is this the most original thing that's ever been made? Is this going to make $1 million? Is this going to get me an Oscar? Whatever. You should be looking at this as these are bricks you're laying on the road, and you just need to lay the next one down. You're going to need to write a lot of scripts in order to start to get any good at this. So don't be way too attached to the ideas. And the great thing about being early in your career and also writing boot camps like this is that you can pick crazier, weirder ideas that would never get made, but that just keep you excited and keep your momentum and your energy up as you're moving through that first draft. So we'll also look at revised loglines. So if you post a logline early in class and revise it, then we can check again at the end. And we'll have lots of time for questions throughout. But also remember to use that text chat. On the left-hand side of your Discord window, just mouse over that general chat and click on that, and you can find that white word bubble and type your questions or comments as we go. All right. Any questions before we begin? Everybody good? All right, let's go into it. So, we'll start with just this quick discussion. You can feel free to chime in and tell us about yourself. Is this your first script you've ever written? Why the interest in screenwriting? Have you read lots of scripts before? What kind of scripts are you intending to write? What is your goal for your career? Feel free, anyone who'd like to either unmute or tell us over text. Tell us about some of your goals and what is it that you're hoping to do? Why screenwriting?
Want to create good childhood memories for people.
Good childhood memories. I haven't heard that answer before. Can you explain?
You know, God, I'm not comparing myself to, geniuses or, accomplished people. But, well, yeah, but just, Miyazaki films, maybe not quite Disney, but things a bit, off-color Disney.
Okay.
Hard to explain, but just treasured childhood memories.
All right, so you want to write specifically for a younger audience, you mean?
Not exclusively, but that is part of the goal. I also want to make, adult stuff, so...
Cool. Well, that's great. I mean, yeah, that's a good, very specific goal to have. There's no reason you have to just write one or the other just for kids or just for adults, but it tends to be that people who write for younger audiences over time might have trouble transitioning if they just do one of them for a while. Like if you just write kids stuff for a while, for years, and then you try to move to adult, then it can be a little bit trickier to cross over, but it's not a huge deal and you can absolutely do both, especially in something like animation where there's room for your, Adventure Times, and then there's room for your early childhood kind of your Blue's Clues, and then there's also room for the South Parks and the Ricks and Mortys and things like that. So there's a lot of variety in what you can do, and you're never going to be tied entirely into one path. Thank you for the answer, though. That's a good answer. Anyone else have a career goal or some reason why you chose screenwriting, or something that you'd like to share with us for what your goals are and what you're aiming to do?
Mine is... go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
It's all good, man.
So I've currently been doing this podcast that's set up like an audio book, but as I come to realize, more people are more visual, so they would like to like see it. So I feel like me getting to learn how to write screenwriting, I can actually write out the script for it and hopefully shoot it one day.
Great. Okay, so you're gonna make a sort of independent, maybe web series or independent films by yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of like the Donald Glover aspect where he's actually playing and writing as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's great. We don't get a lot of people who want to do that, but that is totally an option. It's a little, I will say, there's a bit more of a tradition of that in TV than in features. Like, you don't see as many writer stars in features as you do on TV shows. Think of someone like Phoebe Waller-Bridge on Fleabag, or Jerry Seinfeld on Seinfeld, or like any of these things where it's like or Louis C.K. had his show like that, where it's just like the star is also the creator, is also the writer, is also the everything. So you can totally do that. In features, it's a little tougher to make that happen, but there's definitely a tradition of that sort of stuff happening too. You should consider writing pilots as well, though.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Great goals to have. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what Gray was saying, but it's, I am my greatest passion is film. I have so many books on film. I have watched so many movies. It's what I studied in college was film studies, and I, other than some, just personal, I want to create things because I like creating things. I really just want to, at some point down the line, have something that's produced, so that I am even just a little footnote in the, in a book, in somebody's, movie log, in whatever. I just want to feel like I'm part of it,
Yeah, of course. I would love to get. I've never had a movie produced either, so that would be great. Even my episode of TV show that I wrote did not get shot, so it's hard. It's a hard road to get something produced, but that's what I think a lot of us are hoping for. Is you want to make some kind of mark or have some kind of legacy or to have something that people like and enjoy in the world and will refer back to and say, they recommend it to their friends and it makes people happy. Like, that kind of stuff is great. That's why a lot of us are here, I think.
That's the dream.
Let's see. Frightful Mystic in our chat says, for me, it's like telling some stories that'll last and teach the next generation. Okay, interesting. So you want the themes of the stories to sort of be instructive in some way. Playing your part and passing the torch. Very cool. Very noble goals. We have someone else in the chat. Bruss says, first screenplay, studied film 30 years ago, exploring the possibility to use form to be creative and share with the world. Great. Okay, yes. First screenplay. This is a fine place to be. This is sort of like ABCs of how to write a movie from scratch. And if you find after this that, you want to do more, then taking another boot camp afterwards is just a nice way to apply everything that you've already learned. But now that you have learned those things, the next one just gets easier, and they just get easier from there. That first one is a tough hill to climb, but once you have climbed it, then clearly you are capable of writing movies, so you should be able to do more. Thanks for these comments, everybody. Anybody else want to weigh in before we move to the next slide? All right, let's move on for now. Sounds like we have a great mix of, sort of goals and things in the class, which is very cool. If you are trying to branch out and see what else you can, or see what other types of this sort of writing you might want to try, you should consider checking out some of the pilot classes as well, even if you just, watch one of the videos from that course. And short film is a great way to start if you are just looking to write your very first thing. You're not sure about how structure works, and maybe you are intimidated by doing a full feature. Starting with a short is a nice way to do that. So maybe think of watching those first two short film classes and catching up with our current session, which will be this upcoming Saturday. So here's some ground rules. Get used to the idea of sharing your work at early stages and getting feedback on the work even at early stages. When you share something at an earlier stage, it will get more notes because early ideas need more development. So you should be prepared to hear, even if you're like, I know it needs a lot of work, you're still going to hear a lot of notes on these early ideas because, of course, an early idea is less developed, therefore we'll be getting more feedback. So it's tough to hear that sometimes at early stages, but it's not a sign that you shouldn't pick that idea or that it's bad or that it's wrong. You will never be able to write a movie idea and get no notes from anyone. It just doesn't really happen. I am not able to send scripts to anyone and not get any notes. You know, J.J. Abrams is going to get a bunch of notes. In screenwriting, there will always, 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 always be notes. And unless you're funding and financing the entire movie yourself, you're going to get notes. If you are paying for everything, you can do whatever you want. But, movies cost millions of dollars. So if you have millions of dollars, send me a message and we can do some private classes or something. But you generally are going to be beholden to getting other people to collaborate with you on this and having to listen to their responses if you're going to want to have access to the things that they're bringing to the table or offering. So please use your real name if you're going to advance any further in the course. On this class, you don't have to use a real name in the one that you're in right now. You can keep a screen name, but if you're going to continue past the first week of a boot camp, please change your Discord nickname to your real name or a nickname that you want to use. You can right-click your username to change it, or we can change it for you. So here's some suggestions for the types of movies that you should choose. So in this course, you're writing one movie, so you should try to start already narrowing down the idea that you want to try to focus on. But here's some suggestions for you. Don't do true stories, anthologies, rewrites, or adaptations, because these things will just require usually a lot more time than the course will offer, or something like a rewrite will just be a very different process than writing a brand new script from scratch. Sounds like we're getting some background sound from someone's mic. If you guys wouldn't mind just checking to see if your mic is muted by clicking the gray microphone icon on Discord. What else? Ground rules. So, don't do time travel. Just believe me, just trust me, especially if it's your first couple scripts. It's really, really difficult to keep time travel straight on the page, and you want the majority of your notes to be on things like character and the plot and the pacing and the emotion and things like that. You don't want the majority of notes you get being, wait, I don't understand how that person was there at that time, or wasn't there a paradox there, or how were there two people there, or wouldn't the timeline be broken by this? You just don't want the majority of your notes to be about that. So unless you know exactly what you're doing, don't do time travel. Probably don't do a historical, just because these require more research and you only have 8 weeks to write the whole thing. Beware of things that are tricky to keep straight on the page, aside from time travel too, things like clones, parallel universes, multiverse, montage, scripts that have a ton of flashbacks or alternate timelines. Unless your movie has those really built into the core of its structure, those can be really difficult to keep straight. But this bootcamp is a good place to just write something crazy you've always wanted to see or always wanted to write, or maybe you want to write something sort of like a movie you like already. You're like, I really love, I don't know, slasher movies like Halloween and Scream, but I would want to do my own sort of one of those. This can be an okay place to just be like, okay, I'm going to try to find some weird slasher that's never been done before and try that out, for instance. So if you don't have an idea yet, maybe try some mashup concept you've always wanted to see. If you're like, I really love historical costume dramas and also alien invasion movies. Okay, what if I did a movie about an alien invasion that happens in, 16th century France? That sounds cool. I've never seen anything like that. So maybe you think no one would want to make that really, but this is something that might keep you excited and keep your energy and momentum up to finish that. So try to pick an idea that is newer and fresher and more fun to you, and you're more willing to change. You don't want to be picking ideas for the bootcamp that you have a really strong sense of how it needs to go already. Like, that's why we're not doing rewrites or adaptations or true stories, because you should be open to lots of changes, and pick an idea that you will be more open to changing around and to, you're learning how this works. This is practice. It's like you're going to the gym. It's not like you're trying to write your masterpiece in this class, and the script will probably not even turn out that good, as we know, because if you're early on and you're just getting into writing, of course it won't be that good. No one's first painting is worthy of hanging in a museum for the most part. So just try not to pick some old idea that is really important to you. Try to pick something new that you can be kind of wacky and different with, and just stay excited about. Generally, if you're spending longer than 6 months on a script and you aren't being paid for it, you should change up your process, and you should look to be able to finish scripts in that 8 to 12 week kind of span, at least for the first draft. It's your job, though, ultimately to write a bunch of really bad scripts before you get to those good ones. Because this first draft, as I just mentioned, will not be good, but let's move past the idea that any script needs to be good. You don't need to get good notes on a script in order for that to be a success or to have learned anything from that. And most of the time when you're just getting going, I know it's difficult, it's one of the hardest things about this, but you will spend a long time and a lot of hard work on something, and then you will turn it over, and you will just get a bunch of negative notes. And you'll be like, did they even enjoy anything at all? Maybe not. And that's just part of this. Screenwriting is like learning to play the violin. It's very difficult to make the instrument itself make a clear and consistent tone and sound. So there's a steep learning curve to this, and your first couple scripts will probably be really bad, and that's okay. And don't worry about that or think that that means you're bad at this and shouldn't continue with this. Accept the badness and give yourself permission to write bad stuff, and you will just be way better off. All right, here's the process. For number one, Sketchbook. Number one is logline, so we'll work on that a lot today. Number two is Sketchbook. That's going to be that basically a scrapbook or collage of all of your influences, inspirations, and ideas related to this project. So we're going to make that in our next slide and start working on that now. Your story beats comes next. That's next week. So you're going to go more into structure, and we're going to figure out where those main events of the story would take place. Then we expand that into scene cards, full paragraph for every scene. We then go to pages. Go to pages means you start writing the script in the screenwriting software of your choice, which I recommend Writer Duet or Arc Studio for this. There's a bunch of options, but just don't be using Microsoft Word or something like this. Just use an actual screenwriting software. Go to pages means you start actually you go from outlining and pre-writing to actively writing the script, writing all the dialogue, writing all the interactions and everything like that are fully staged and blocked out on the page. So up until that last step, we're not writing a single formatted page. You don't need to even download Writer Duet until halfway through this class. I think I went over these ground rules already. Yeah, I did. All right, so log lines. Let's do sketchbooks first. So go to Google Docs. If you have not already made your sketchbook, we're going to make it right now. Where do I have my sketchbook thing? All right, so go to Google Docs and make a brand new blank document. You're going to call it Sketchbook, and with the title of the movie, if you have the title already, and if you don't have the title, just call it Feature Sketchbook. And at the top, you want to just put down your title if you have it, and the genre that you want to do. And maybe we should go a little into genres before we move further, but let's make sure to make that sketchbook first, and remember to be working on this in class, and to be adding things to that sketchbook as they come to you, as you're getting new ideas, and as you start to tinker around with the various story elements. Be writing things throughout the course so that you are remaining, engaged and active, and I just feel it's a better use of your time in class rather than, if you really want to play Minecraft or something while you're listening, you can. But I recommend working on the sketchbook because it's not always easy to find writing time during the week, as you guys, I'm sure, have realized. And so using the class time to work on that and be able to answer or get answers to questions and things in real time is really useful. So I recommend make that sketchbook now. Sketchbook, there's nothing wrong that goes in here. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but it's just going to be a place where you will, write down ideas for all your characters, ideas for the scenes that will be in the movie. If you have some idea for some awesome line of dialogue that's going to show up later, just put it down on the page. You don't really have to even organize it. It's just for you, really. But you're going to be coming up with ideas for scenes, some possible endings for the script, snippets of dialogue, or maybe research materials like photos or video clips or drawings or anything else that just inspires your work. So make sure to make that sketchbook and start adding to that right now. Questions on anything we've talked about so far? All right, if there's no questions, we'll move on to... Do I have a slide on genre? I thought I did. Maybe I don't in here. Let's just talk genre for a minute before we go into... let's just link that into premise. So, a premise is the idea for the movie, and it's sort of... You're able to boil it down to a pretty simple expression. The simplest expression is a written form of the premise called the log line. We'll get into that in a second, but this is sort of just like, what is the story about? Included in this is the world, the conflict, the antagonist, the time frame, the hook, and we should generally know what kind of story that we are writing. What is a genre? A genre is just telling you the kind of things to expect in different types of stories, and it's a collection of expectations, promises, and tropes. Tropes are not necessarily a bad thing. They are just archetypes and types of moments or types of characters, or plot elements of any kind that just have existed before in some form. We can always make them your own, or you can twist them, or you can use archetypes in unusual ways. There's no reason that just because your script fits into a genre that it needs to be formulaic for that genre, but there are formulas for many genres, and you should watch a lot of movies and learn how these different genres work. Specifically, if you're about to write one that you've never seen an example of that before, you're going into very dangerous territory because you don't know what's been done, you don't know what the cliches are, you don't know what the expectations are, and you don't know what the audience is looking for. You should probably write a genre that you're a big fan of. You don't have to do that. You can try to branch out and do something different, but if you're just starting, stick with what you know, and stick with what works, and stick with the thing that you could, a genre that you love, and that you can tell us how the average movie in that genre works like the back of your hand. You've seen so many of these that it's just like second nature to you. Those are usually going to be the better ones to pick. And so when you're thinking of genre, you can combine it with one other thing. Just try not to add more than don't have more than 2, because I say to imagine it like at the frozen yogurt place where it's like you can get chocolate and the vanilla, and then you see all the toppings, and you're so tempted to put the cherries and the mango and the caramel and the gummy bears, and by the time you get to the counter, it's just a mess of sugar soup in your hand, and we don't even know what it is anymore. So chocolate and vanilla is always going to be better than chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, caramel, kiwi. See what I mean? So try to just narrow your focus to just 2 genres. Some of these combinations of genres are sort of genres in and of themselves already. Something like a rom-com has it's romance and it's comedy, but a rom-com has its own expectations and tropes that come with that. So you should watch enough of those to understand what those are and know how the stories generally go, and you know what's been done, and you know what a rom-com looks and feels like, basically. And then, so you should be able to, you can pick a strange combination that's never been done before. You can do a sci-fi western, or you can do a musical gangster crime movie or something like that if you want to. There's no reason you shouldn't do those things, but just know what the expectations are and watch enough of those that you can adequately appeal to fans of that kind of stuff, because you have to imagine that fans will have seen a bunch of that stuff already, and so if they're going to watch something else of that nature, they're going to want something different, but also something that feels like it fulfills those promises that were made to them. So much of storytelling is about setting expectations and promises and then fulfilling them, or perhaps subverting them and sidestepping them and giving the audience something better than they wanted originally. But we kind of have to know what we're promising in order to fulfill it. So this premise is the core at the heart of your story, and it's really essential in explaining or pitching your work. It's basically just the answer to what is this about. So if you're not filling out your sketchbook with ideas for your current movie premise and your genre, then this is a good time to do that. Premise is important, though, just because it's the main criteria by which people judge if they're going to read your script or not. If they like the premise, they'll probably read it. If they don't, they probably won't. So your premise should imply the genre that the movie is, of course. It should seem like it fits into any genre at all. It determines also who might have the interest or ability to make a movie like that, so that's how you're going to be deciding whom you might actually send something like this to. Stronger premises are just more marketable and more likely to be read and more likely to be produced, and a stronger premise is a good barometer for the quality of the overall script. If the premise is bad, why would the script be good? Execution dependent is sort of the opposite of high concept, but we'll talk about that distinction in a moment. We're usually looking for a high concept idea that just from telling someone the idea alone, they get excited and they say, oh, I want to check that out. That sounds cool. I would commit to spending, potentially a few hours of my life reading that and maybe giving feedback to it or considering to make it or something of this nature. But a high concept idea will almost always be more exciting on its own. An execution dependent idea would be something that would only be good if you pulled it off really well. It's like a story that's a little bit harder to pitch. And it's not that you can't write those, but we want to be building that skill of the ability to create high concept premises and to know how they work really well, even if what you want to do is mostly more execution dependent. Don't nudge the Pachinko machine. This is like sort of a gambling game where the ball will drift down these different pegs and it will sort of land in one of these slots at the bottom. So I say, don't nudge it too much. You want to let the idea sort of develop into what it wants to be. If you find yourself if you're like forcing an idea to work, it won't usually work out that well. So you need to what you're usually looking for with a premise, I like to think of it like this. You're looking for an idea that you're like, oh, that's so good. Well, that's got to have been done already. Like, there's got to be a movie like that out there. Like, there just has to be. And then if you look for it and you can't find it, you know that's a good idea. Because if it seems so clear and so obvious, it's something that just feels like a movie that exists somewhere out in the ether. You can sort of think of it almost like that does exist somewhere in the, psychic brainwaves of the nation or whatever. And it's just, I'm going to be the one who's going to chip away everything around that and sort of excavate that premise from whole cloth. So look for some idea that you're like, oh, that must exist. And then obviously you should check to see if it does. But it's not to say that you can't do something similar to something that has existed before. The goal of this class is not to write something incredibly mind-blowingly original, but the more original and interesting your script is, some people are more likely to read it and to be interested in reading the whole thing. So try to pick this idea, as I mentioned before, that's fresher in your mind, not something you've been working on for a long time. I'm going to go over high concept a little bit, and then I'll pause for questions on premise, genre, and this paradigm of high concept versus execution dependent. Okay, so high concept. What does it actually mean? A lot of people have an idea of what this means that is a misconception. High concept does not mean a complicated story. It's not high concept because it's about theoretical physics or, I don't know, space travel or whatever. High concept could be about anything. It could be about a guy trying to buy a sandwich from a store. It has nothing to do with the genre or the budget or the subject matter at all. It is an engaging and self-contained premise with broad appeal that has a high reliance on the concept. That's what it's referring to, high reliance on concept, in order to sell that story or to communicate that story. We're looking for something that will bloom in the mind to suggest the entire thing. We want to be able to, quote, see the movie. If you hear somebody say, you explain the premise to them and they say, I can't really see the movie, they're referring to the fact that they can't imagine what would even be happening in it or what the appeal would be. You want to have a premise that's so simple and so elemental that the audience can immediately start to fill in the kind of blanks, and it will make them excited to check it out. So look at something like Shanghai Noon, one of my favorite movies of all time. Action comedy from 2003. We have a kung fu guy in the Old West. It's as simple as that. This thing meets that thing is kind of at the heart of high concept. And you can sort of imagine, it's going to be like it is a Jackie Chan kung fu action comedy, but in this new setting where he's an outsider, he's a fish out of water, he partners up with a cowboy, so we're going to see some really interesting conflict there, and also that buddy dynamic, that's so great, and buddy, sort of genre stories, everything from your Jump Street to your Lethal Weapon is going to be like stories about two people that have to partner up and work together despite their differences. So I can imagine all kinds of cultural differences between kung fu guy and Old West guy. I can imagine all kinds of and I know I've seen this movie many times, but I can just see it. You just say Shanghai Noon. It's high noon. It's Shanghai plus Old West. It's kung fu guy in Old West. I can see the entire thing. Something like The Ring. There's a journalist investigating a videotape that kills you in 7 days. All right, that has a really clear time frame built into it, a unique horror hook that we have not seen before or had not seen before at that time, and plus it has the way that the curse works in that movie. It works perfectly for structure because it adds that great ticking clock to the plot. You have 7 days to solve this mystery, then you die, which is just really nice. A movie like Yesterday. What if there's a struggling musician, and he's a big fan of the Beatles, and he gets in a car accident, and when he wakes up, something weird has happened with the universe where everybody has forgotten that the Beatles exist, and now he's going to get to be the one to create all their music from scratch, essentially plagiarizing a band that in this universe doesn't exist. We can totally see that. Struggling musician gets to become the Beatles, basically. I can imagine the set pieces. I can imagine him going on late night shows. I can imagine him becoming wealthy and successful and causing conflict with his earlier friends and things like that. So all those things do happen in the movie, but you can just see it. You just see it. That's what high concept is. It feels like it sort of exists out there already, and we're trying to capitalize on that by showing, by delivering the best possible version of that this thing meets that thing story that we possibly can. Liar, liar. He's a lawyer. His son makes a wish that he can't lie anymore. He's always lying, so the kid makes a wish that's like, you can't lie for one whole day. That's the premise of the movie. It's going to take place within that one day where this guy who used to lie a lot now can't lie at all. That's this thing meets that thing. It's a liar is going to be forced to be honest. And we're going to imagine all kinds of comedic situations that can arise from that scenario. So that's the basics of high concept. Just hearing the concept alone is enough for somebody to say, oh, that sounds so cool, I got to check that out. The opposite of high concept would be execution dependent. And it's not to say execution dependent is bad and high concept is good, but it is to say that if your story is something like, well, a kid grows up in Missouri and he encounters a lot of challenges as he gets older. That sounds like really execution dependent to me because it will only be good dependent on how you pull it off. If you write that really, really well and it has great directing and great leads, then that might be something that is really maybe even an Oscar movie, but it is not something that would necessarily get someone super excited from just hearing kid grows up in Missouri. It doesn't have an inherent sense of irony. It doesn't have an inherent sense of clear hook to it. A hook is at the core of the high concept, and the hook is basically saying, you, the audience member, have watched a million of these movies. Why would you watch this one? What's that one thing that's going to say, oh, okay, that's a different way we're going to access this story that we may have seen versions of before? It's as simple as, imagine we're going to do a Shakespeare movie. Let's do Othello. But you might do it from a different POV. We might do, Shakespeare, imagine, we might do Hamlet, but from the POV of one of the female characters instead. That's enough to be a hook, right? It's saying this is the same type of story as before, but with something twisted, something different, and it's going to give you the appeal that you want, it's going to be the same but different. It's going to give you the type of story that you want, but with slightly different elements there that are going to make it feel fresh and not like we're watching something that we've seen a million times before. So here's more on execution dependent. If they rely on complex character study, or they're an adaptation of something that everybody knows already, like Dune or something very execution dependent. You're saying things like, well, this will be a comedy because it'll just be funny, just believe me. Like, typically in a comedy logline, the premise should sound funny. If it's like a guy needs to bury his parents who have died, that doesn't sound that funny, but you might be able to find a way to make that high concept. Think of a movie like Death at a Funeral. Nothing about that sounds that funny until you look at, oh, okay, we have this main character who's trying to stop all this chaos from happening at his father's funeral and trying to, put the fires out and keep the situation from going out of control. So I can easily see how that would be funny. So there might be a way to just take an idea that is otherwise somewhat execution dependent and just describe it or explain it a little bit differently so that it reads as more high concept. You want to avoid these kind of vague stakes that rely on our knowledge of outside material, or perhaps these very vague kind of fantasy or sci-fi type goals where we're like, I don't know, what's at stake? All of the planet of Zagmore. And we're like, what's that? How many people live there? I don't have an idea of what that actually means. Or if we're giving log lines that are just like, a princess must steal an amulet to save a kingdom. It's like, well, that kind of just sounds like you've just described the genre of fantasy almost. So it doesn't really come across as that hooky or high concept. But if you were like, it's a fantasy quest adventure from the perspective of a talking cat, then maybe we'd be like, oh, okay, I can see how that in and of itself is something that would get people excited based on just the logline. So you want to avoid these straight biopics or historical adaptations where it's like, I don't know, the story of Pearl Harbor. That your whole idea can't just be the story of blank. You have to give us the hook. The high concept version of that might be something like, we're going to follow a mechanic who has to team up with a Japanese pilot who crashes in the water, and an American mechanic ends up stranded on a sinking ship with him, and they need to work together to get out. That would be a very high concept Pearl Harbor type story. If your idea is just, it's Pearl Harbor, the movie, then, well, it's very execution dependent. All right, so I'm going to stop and take questions on execution dependent versus high concept, premises, loglines, or genre before we get going. Questions about anything we've talked about along those lines?
I got a quick question.
Sure.
So the high concepts, do they, like you gave the example where, like that kid, you said there was a lot of different avenues you can go, like if you write it good or whatnot. The high concepts, would you say they limit your writing? Do you do it that way?
If you do high concept ideas limit the writing of the script? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay, no, not at all. And in fact, having a great high concept premise will really energize the script and give you lots of new options, and it will make people even more excited. So I've never seen an instance where a high concept idea has been more limiting than an execution dependent one. Maybe somebody else has an example that they can think of, but off the top of my head, no, I don't think so at all.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Any other questions on genre or premise before we go more into loglines? I want to next look at the loglines from last week, so I'll wait another 5 seconds to see if anyone has a question before we go into updated loglines. If you were here last week, maybe you had an early version of one. Any other questions before we do that? Okay, so if you have an updated logline, or maybe just one that you are ready for feedback on that you think is worthy of sharing, then go ahead and post it in our chat now, and we can take a look and maybe give you some additional guidance so that by the end of class today, you can have finished this off, finalized it, and, made those last improvements. So go ahead and post if you got it, whatever you've got for loglines. And Nacho is suggesting to me we just make everybody post. Okay, we can ask that. All right, so sure. Even if you weren't here last week and you have a sort of half-formed logline, or you have like an idea for your movie, you can go ahead and post it now. If you don't have anything or you don't have anything ready to share yet, you don't have to. But if you want to get some early feedback, then now would be a good time. Anybody have a logline to share? So I guess I see a few people typing in the chat, so I'll give you just like a minute to write something out. Josh said he's making some last-minute adjustments. That's fine. If we don't have any to give feedback on yet, we can always just come back to this later as well. Let me bring up a document so we can paste and take a look at a few of these on the screen. All right, so let me see what we have here. Oops. Okay, anyone have something to share? Let's check. I don't see any just yet. Okay, so if no one has a logline or even a half-finished one to share yet, I will check back later in class. It looks like Josh has posted a sketchbook. Josh, do you want to go over logline now? All right, so let's take a look at Josh. And looks like Paul has posted one too. Thank you, Paul. And Mystic has one as well. Go ahead and paste it in the chat if you've got it. Let's start with Josh.
All right, so yeah, it's the same as last week's. After moving into it, I've adjusted a bit, and I'm just having difficulty with the end of my logline.
Okay.
After moving into a gated community, a good-natured family man discovers his new neighborhood is inhabited by classic horror characters, and he must protect his family before the end of his lease.
Nice. Okay, I think this is working pretty well. Yeah, this has been developed a little bit since last time. After moving into a gated community, a good-natured family man discovers his new neighborhood is inhabited by classic horror characters. By this, you mean monsters?
Monsters, yeah.
And they're all monsters?
Monsters and you know, like Dr. Frankenstein, Dracula,
okay.
these kind of human characters that are also considered monstrous.
Fair enough. Okay, you can say characters then. And he must protect his family before the end of his lease. Are they classic horror characters in his world, or are they only classic horror characters to us? Like, would he be like, hey, look, it's Dracula?
I don't know yet, because I had this idea that that they created this community because people weren't going to, you know, the woods anymore, or people weren't going to spooky castles anymore, because there were these reputations for them being scary and weird. So they came up with fake identities and created this community.
The easiest thing to do would probably be that the characters just don't know about Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff, because then otherwise the alternative is, what are we saying, that those books were like records of their actual deeds, you know? So it'd be just, I feel like that would raise a lot of questions. The easiest thing to probably do is just say these nobody knows about these things beforehand. It'll be brand new to them, and they could theoretically meet their neighbor. Oh, have you met Victor Frankenstein yet? He's the nicest guy. They won't actually be like, what? Okay. Frankenstein? I think that'll just be the best way to play it.
I like that. Thank you.
Sure. This is good. How long until the end of his lease?
I mean, I would say it's a year. I don't, you know, that's where I'm kind of struggling. I just like the that kind of ironic hook.
I do
that he
too.
would have to
It's
stay-
very funny. It's almost like makes it almost feel a little bit like a sitcom to me, just
Yeah.
because I feel like if you're laying out the stakes as he needs to protect them till the end of the lease, then you're sort of saying that his family is not in that much danger to me, because if it was like he needs to get them out right away, then I would believe, oh, they're going to be killed any moment. You know what I mean? But whereas if you say just before the end of the lease, that leads me to believe that could be months. So is that the timeline you're thinking about?
I don't know. I mean, I wanted a. I don't know what my timeline necessarily is at this point. I would like it to be a. So I had this idea that that they're given they don't know this, obviously, because they move in to this neighborhood, and for a false sense of security, all of the residents have a 30-day grace period where the new resident settles in, and they know their neighbors, and they feel safe, and they, oh, this is so wonderful, and then all of a sudden bad things start happening, and they start getting hunted, and there's a ticking clock for the antagonists who, Wolfman's got a Wolfman, and so on and so forth. So, but beyond that, I would picture it. I think it would be easier for me to write, well, all hell's broken loose after the 30 days, and now they have to survive becoming enslaved or becoming murdered or becoming whatever version of whoever wins, essentially, amongst horror characters.
Okay, so I guess the logline is working quite well, and might just require a little bit more development of the idea before you figure out the specifics of how to highlight what the exact stakes and urgency are. Because my one thought is the level of urgency is not totally clear to me based on the logline, because I'm like, if it's till the end of the lease, that makes me think they're going to keep going to school and stuff. They're not like hiding in their house the whole time, are they? So they're going to keep trying to live a life in the neighborhood even though they know there's monsters everywhere. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is I don't know that yet.
That's okay. Yeah, no, that's just something that you might want to, over the next week or two, maybe change the logline to reflect as you consider this more.
I mean, if I just took out, he must protect his family, period. Does that...
To me, that sounds like a TV it sounds like a show then. It doesn't sound like a movie as much, because most people would just leave the community if their family became in danger immediately. And if the walls of the story take place from when he gets there to when he leaves, then we probably want to know, what is that actual timeline going to look like? Or if we aren't going to rely on the time frame of the events, then it might be something like when he moves into a new neighborhood and his family finds themselves enslaved by the local vampires as their servants or something like that. Now he needs to find a way to escape. Something like that would make sense to me. We don't have a timeline attached to it, but I get, oh, they're physically being kept here, and his goal is, how do we get out? Know what I mean?
I'm just going to put escape as a...
Yeah, that could be the goal, and rather than we just need... So, yeah, it's going to come down to how you phrase what the actual goal is. That's going to highlight the urgency. If this is going to be more like a Munsters or Addams Family type sitcom, where it's like, we know that there's monsters in the neighborhood, and basically we just can't slip up and let them know that we know about them, and that's how we're going to live, maybe I could see that sort of working. We need to just play it cool until the lease. We just need to not, arouse any suspicion. Maybe that could work, and, they'll kill us if they find out that we know. Or maybe if you want to do a much more intense sort of thriller pacing kind of version, the thriller pacing version might be something like, at the midpoint, holy crap, our neighbors are monsters, we gotta get out of here, but then they're coming to kill us. We have to find a way to escape the neighborhood over the course of one night, something like that. So I think maybe think about, do you want this to have more thriller pacing, or is this going to feel like a more comedy-ish?
Okay.
It's okay if you don't have the answers now, but just that is my thoughts based on this.
Yeah, no, I don't have the answers, because I would want to write a horror comedy. That is my goal here. But I'm also happy with it being a thriller. I just have to think about how I want that all to play out. I would like the idea of them not being able to escape. I would like, I don't know. I think I just need to think on it.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, great setup. I love the idea. The title reads a little generic to me, and I feel like
I know. I just can't think of anything better right
that's
now.
okay. You can use it as a placeholder, and ultimately the goal is not really originality, but maybe think of what is the name of the neighborhood. Is it something that implies monsters? Is it called like Welcome
That's
to
exactly
Bite
what I was thinking.
Town or something? I don't know. Welcome to
Wow.
Bitesville. So that might just be something that might make a little hookier, but ultimately title is not super key. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, something that was exactly the kind of thing I was thinking. I just haven't it hasn't. I haven't had a eureka moment yet. So
That's okay. Any questions on this?
not just now. I might. I'm gonna keep working on my sketchbook as we're going and see if anything occurs to me. So
Cool. Something that also, I'll just say one last thing that has occurred to me as a result of this. If the dad's goal if you're doing the main character as the dad, and the dad's goal is to protect the family, part of his goal early on might be he's the only one that learns the truth, and now he needs to convince the family that this is actually real and going on. That might be some nice moments for your trying the lock section. It's like the dad has found out the truth, and if he was the one who like pushed really hard for the family to move here, maybe now he might feel weird about, now I have to convince them to leave. They might be more hesitant to do that because they're like, we just moved here, Dad. Like, he needs to really prove it to them before they can start taking more action. So that just might be some nice first act stuff for you.
yeah, I like that because I mean it's kind of the my comps are the burb. It includes the burbs, and that's kind of Tom Hanks trying to prove to Carrie Fisher that the neighbor is a killer,
Right.
and it works. So cool.
Cool. Thank you for this.
No problem.
Let's look at a couple more. And then we will do some more slides. So I see one from Paul. I see one from Frightful Mystic. That one looks like a fan fiction. So just as a note to Frightful Mystic, for the for the feature bootcamp, we're doing no adaptations, true stories, fan fictions, or like versions of other people's IP. So if you have an idea for a brand new original feature, we'd be glad to take a look at the logline for that. Let's look at Paul's. Are you there, Paul? Is Paul in the chat? He is. He is muted. Can you hear us, Paul? All right. We may have to come back to him later. Do we have other ones? Jay Flamingo. Shall we take a look at that?
Absolutely.
Hi, Jay. Can you read this idea out for us?
Repeat that one more time.
Can you read the outline, or sorry, read the logline out?
Oh, yes, sir. Shiner, Texas, a small unknown town with population 2,100, gets a world famous water park. Now, rival town Dryer, they have to go to Shiner in order to go to the world famous water park.
Dryer and Shiner. That's kind of funny. Is this a comedy, or what's the genre here?
The genre would be most definitely comedy.
Got it. Okay. So, a small unknown town with population 2,100 gets a world famous water park. It's a world famous chain of water parks. You mean has added an establishment there? Like, how would it be world famous? Okay,
absolutely.
That is what you. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So now rival town Dryer has to go to Shiner in order to go to the famous water park. And you're saying that's causing conflict between the residents of these two towns?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Cool. So I like the setup. That's unique, and it sounds pretty funny. I like the idea of tiny town gets a big attraction, and now their rival town is going to start, I guess, showing up more and causing all kinds of problems for them. So the basis of this idea sounds original, and I like this. This is interesting. So my feedback for you is character. You need character in a logline, or else we don't have like the complete picture of what the story would be. So who's the main character here would be the first question. Protagonist. We need to know who are we following? Whose journey is this? It's okay if you don't have an answer yet, but these are just things to work on for your revision of this. So we have a sort of template that we often use for loglines. I'm going to share it with you now. And you don't have to use this exact thing, but you might find that this is a good place to start, and then you can change it from there. Here it is. So when inciting incident, so that's the event that kicks the story off. So for you, it would be, when his or her tiny backwoods town gets a very cool water park, an adjective protagonist. Then you would describe your main character. So you would say something like, a grieving widow, or a just you can describe them in one adjective and one noun. So an ambitious teenager. Describe who they are. Must conflict before or in order to stakes. So in your case, it might be something like the mayor of this tiny town must find a way to settle the conflicts that this creates with all the citizens before it rips the town apart. Something like that. So how do you see the sort of stakes of the story? Is it that the rival town people are going to come over and it's going to cause so much conflict that it will ruin things in our original town?
So the main character is this 12-year-old kid named Logan Winters. So he actually has family in the rival town. So basically where the story ends up is that those two towns actually come together to create a better town.
Okay, cool. So you have a good sense of the ending, and maybe we can sort of start to extrapolate a theme from that. This is about, putting aside our differences or grievances and becoming stronger as a community, maybe something along those lines. But so if the main character is a kid, that does change things quite a bit, because a kid would have different responsibilities and a different goal than an adult in this situation would have. So I think you just need to clarify what is the protagonist's goal. So that's going to give us a sense of what the main character is actually trying to do, and what we're going to be watching on screen. So I would try to find a way to summarize. It's like, when this water park shows up, a 12-year-old must do what? Use that word must to imply that urgency, and if it's a conflict that requires them to do something, then that's going to feel like it's more important than it's just they decide to, he feels like he wants to be a lifeguard, so he decides to go be a lifeguard. Well, doesn't really sound like a very urgent story. But if it's like when his I don't know a situation where someone would have to become a lifeguard, when his children take up swimming and they swim and they're swimming really badly, a father decides he must become a lifeguard in order to, I don't know, protect his kids. Terrible example, but we just want to imply a character has to do this. It's like it's going to be a difficult journey for them to accomplish, but it's going to be why it's worth our time, because movies aren't really about insubstantial journeys or unimportant conflicts. Or easy questions. So pick somebody that will have a hard journey to go on here. Somebody who will have to have an uphill road to climb, and maybe somebody with some kind of ironic kind of like investment in the story. If you know what I mean here, it would be something like, a kid who's terrified of the water and hates swimming needs to save the water park. See how that would be like an element of irony there that we're going to be like, oh, okay. So the story's sort of about him overcoming his fear of the water, which is going to be about him growing up. And over the course of that, we also get a better sense of just what makes that character tick. So consider matching a character to the story in terms of who has the hardest journey and who has some kind of ironic investment in what's going on here.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions? From Jay or from anyone? Sound good, Jay? All right, so hopefully that should be enough to... Great, go ahead.
I'm brainstorming.
Cool,
yes,
cool.
Sir.
Okay, so yeah, start brainstorming and just try to work on this, and you can show me an updated version at the end of class. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just start thinking about character. Character is essential for Lotlines.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Jay. All right, I think we have one or two more. Do we have a couple more? Should we do Halloween Mountain from Frightful Mystic? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, can you read this out for us?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Title: Halloween Mountain. Logline: After a tyrannical warlord brainwashes his brother, an unpopular child has to band together his dysfunctional family and reach the peak of Halloween Mountain to save the town and teach his sibling the importance of love and sacrifice.
All right. Thank you for that. And what genre is this?
Oh, yes, I forgot to put it down. It is a action adventure type of family type of genre.
Okay, maybe we can say family adventure. Sure. Okay, after
Part
a
of it.
tr-
It's not
after a
like,
tr- go ahead.
it's not horror, but it's not like full blown horror or anything. It's just completely family type.
Okay, yeah, no, I get it. So we're along the lines of like the Goosebumps movies or something like that, where it's like there is danger and peril, but it's like a movie aimed at a younger audience. That's fine. Okay, after a tyrannical warlock brainwashes his brother, an unpopular child has to band together his dysfunctional family. You probably band together. You normally there might just be a better word than band together. He must organize, he must lead his dysfunctional family, something like that. He must lead his dysfunctional family to the peak of Halloween Mountain to save the town and teach his siblings the importance of love and sacrifice. Okay, so teaching his siblings the importance of love and sacrifice, that sounds like the theme of the story. We don't have to actually include the theme in the logline. So I would cut that first. So, it sounds like you're saying a tyrannical warlock is threatening the town. Is that right? Are you still with us? Oh, you have to switch to text. I see. Thank you. All right. Yes, you are. Okay. So normally we want to have a strong sense of cause and effect in the logline. So here you told us he brainwashes the brother, and then the kid needs to save the town. But I missed the part where the town was in danger. Know what I mean? Or is brainwashing the brother part of a plot to take over the town? You know what I mean? So you're going to want to clarify if it's like after a tyrannical warlock who brainwashes children captures his brother. And then I would be like, okay, his plot is he's trying to brainwash all the children in the town. And that's what your main character needs to stop from happening or save. You know, that's why he's trying to save the town. So just clarify cause and effect and the nature of the threats. I like the specificity of the location you have. I don't know what Halloween Mountain is, but I can imagine, okay, our characters have to go up a spooky mountain, maybe to like a warlock's castle or something like that. And that's all very cool and fine. I like that it has a very tangible goalpost to it. So that's all working. I think you just need to clarify what are the actual stakes here. When you say save the town, I'm not sure what that means. Is he trying to nuke the town, or is he trying to kidnap all the kids from the town, or what is the bad guy actually trying to do? Then we'll have a better sense of what the main character needs to do to stop him. But I like the basics of this. This sounds simple. This sounds like a kid's adventure movie. So I think this fits into its genre. I like the warlock thing. We don't see a lot of warlocks in movies, so I think you've got a lot of good stuff here. Just aim for a little clarity and make sure that the audience has a good sense of why the main character has to do what they're doing. Any questions on this? So it looks like you're still typing some text in the chats. I'm gonna have to. Let me know if you have a question, and I can check back in a moment. Okay, I'll check back in just a minute to see if you have any questions about this. I'll check the text. Don't worry. All right, let's see. Oh, Paul is here now. Great, Paul, you want to read yours? Are you here, Paul? A lot of noise. I wouldn't hear you. Okay, I can check back with you as well. So let me check back with Paul and Frightful in a few minutes. And let me see. Do we have any other loglines that I missed? Ben R? Are you here, Ben?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Can you read out your idea for us, please?
Yeah, I mean, I just joined today, so I don't really have an official log line, but Carmen
okay.
helped me kind of pull one together. Hers was a disillusioned man going through midlife crisis, challenged by generational cultural disparities after discovering his path to peace and freedom.
All right. So it's a dramedy, you're saying, right? All right. about a middle-aged man disillusioned and finds freedom and peace. Wait a minute. What did I just copy and paste from? Is this your logline where it says a guy, he joins a local free run club? Is that yours?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so a middle-aged man that's disillusioned.
I didn't have it like lined up to be a log line because I just joined.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm just reading to see what we have here. So he's joining a free running club, free running like parkour.
Yeah.
Okay. Tackling disparity.
So I mean, it's like
okay.
it's the comedy part is being a goof, basically, and then yeah, there's a whole bunch of things.
Okay, great. So the sort of comedic premise of the movie is he's a middle-aged guy that joins a parkour club, and is he sort of like an outsider there? Like he's kind of out of shape. He doesn't fit in with the rest of them.
Yeah, like so he's like a 45-year-old white male, and it's a mixture of like 17, 20-year-olds, different cultures.
Yeah.
And so, he doesn't really fit in, but somehow like through a certain act, he gets kind of into it and starts questioning how he was raised, and then they play off of each other to like come up with, that everybody's great, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I like the setup, and the midlife crisis sounds like a nice sort of inciting incident for why the character would have to do this. So you might want to use that when you format this as a logline, something like when a midlife crisis pushes him to join this club, or like when attempting to regain control of his life after a midlife crisis, a middle-aged man joins a parkour club for teenagers, right? Or not for teenagers,
right,
but of mostly much younger people, and he must then do blank. So we're looking for he must conflict. And the conflict for a story like this is almost certainly going to be framed around a central relationship between the main character and someone else. So it might be something like he needs to win over the leader of this group in order to be able to stay in it, or he makes friends with somebody in the group, and then they need to work together to keep the group from being shut down, or just look for some kind of goal. Or maybe are they going to compete in like a big race, or like an upcoming social media type event?
Yeah.
I know social media is really big in the parkour kind of world, right?
I don't want it to be cheesy, like they're getting ready for a tournament, like cheerleading tournament or whatever, like they do in every movie.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be more fun. Yeah, but I think from he has a kid around the same age, and I think his relationship with the kid is improved because he can start to see the angle where they're coming from, right?
Oh,
so,
okay. Is his kid in the club?
No, his kid's not in the club.
Not in the club.
But it's about freedom and being older and restricted, always doing what you're supposed to do, and then like he thinks his kid's lazy and doesn't do anything right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple things playing off each other.
Oh, so he's doing this to sort of inspire his kid to be more active, or is that what you're thinking?
No, he has a major problem relating with his kid,
mm-hmm.
And so that's part of the conflict. But it's not going to be like kid and the running club are tied together.
Okay, I would think that if this was just a suggestion for you, if you're saying that he's going to be joining this club and he's trying to reconnect with his kid, it might be that if his kid is kind of an athlete already of some kind, he doesn't have to be in that club. But if your main character is sort of the out of shape dad and his kid is the athlete, maybe you could say that's why they aren't really connecting. And now in an effort to reconnect with his kid, you could even frame the logline around this. You could say something like, to reconnect with his estranged athletic son, an out-of-shape middle-aged dad joins a parkour club, and something along those lines might just make a nice foundation for a logline that might make this feel pretty high concept.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, think about something like that. You don't have to do that, but I'm just looking for that central relationship. Usually in drama or dramedy stories, find the central relationship and you'll find the movie.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any questions on this? From Ben or from anybody?
No, not right now.
Perfect. All right, thanks so much. Great. I'm going to scroll back up in the chat and just see if Frightful Mystic was able to articulate the question that we were asking. So, Frightful Mystic says, I wrote this in 5th grade. Really? Okay. It was a short for a class writing assignment with required words. The idea just stuck with me, and it gets ridiculous. That's great. It can be kind of fun to take a really old idea and try to rework it, so that sounds cool. and it's the town and the family in jeopardy. Okay, yeah, just make sure you clarify why they're in jeopardy and how exactly will the main character's journey address that danger and go towards battling against that, whatever is that. We want to know what's at stake, and we want to know how the main character's journey is going to address that. All right, so Josh says you've reworked it. So we'll take a look at revised log lines at the end. If anybody else has one, did we do Paul's? Oh, he says we can't hear him. If Paul wants to chime in now, we could do yours now, or we could check back at the end. Go ahead. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you want to do yours now, or do you want to wait and come back to you?
Sure, we can do mine now.
Okay.
Let me see. Yeah. When he finds out his foster home is going under, a petty thief and his brothers must save it from being bought out by a business magnate.
All right. Let's put that up on the board. And what's the genre and title?
It's a heist story, and I took the title from my other story because I think it fits this one much better. It's called Equity for Misfits.
Okay. It's heist. So is this funny or is this serious?
There's a lot of I guess I'm gonna write a bunch of jokes when I do end up writing it, but I don't think it's much of a comedy. I mean, there's a lot of I guess serious repercussions in terms of the context of their actions throughout the story.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, well, for now, I would just say maybe write something. A crime comedy does sound like it fits this. Maybe you'd want to say something like caper or like heist or something along these lines. If it's just going to be a heist or comedic tone, you don't need to say it's a comedy as well. But if there's a lot of comedy, you probably would. So let's read the log line again. All right, so when he finds out his foster home is going under meaning it's going to be like repossessed or something?
Yeah.
When you say foster home, you mean like a private residence, not like a business, not like a halfway house or something like that, right?
Yeah, no. I mean like his like the home he grew up in, like his family home, I guess, that he grew up in with. It's like a foster home type thing.
Okay. Normally for houses, we wouldn't say, we say a business is going under. We would say a house is going to be foreclosed on, or like a house is going to be demolished or repossessed, or I would just maybe clarify a little bit what you mean by that. A petty thief and his brothers. How many brothers?
It's 2.
2, okay. Must save it. I would just say 2 brothers then. Must save it from being bought by a business magnate. How are they going to do that?
So they're going to end up so the initial plan is to, I guess, pay off all the debts themselves. Mm-hmm. But then eventually they're going to realize that in the process of stealing all that money from people, they've only made things worse in the long run for a lot of other people in the same way. Mm-hmm. So they're going to kind of turn it around and steal a bunch of money from the business magnate who's trying to buy up their entire neighborhood, basically.
Okay, but that, is there like one, the heist genre is usually going to revolve around one big heist, right? Is there one sort of central heist that they do that they spend most of the movie on?
Not really. It's sort of just a bunch of robberies.
Okay. So crime comedy sounds a little bit more like what this would be rather than heist to me, if that's the case. But regardless of that, I would just want to give us a sense in the logline of what we're going to be doing in the movie. So in the logline right now, you say they must save their house from being bought out. But that doesn't involve a crime spree. I wouldn't have guessed that you mean through a crime spree or through a bunch of robberies. So you need to give us a sense of just how are they going to attempt to tackle that goal? What are we going to be watching people do in the movie? I think this could be they make a bunch of lemonade stands, to raise money. This could be anything, right? If they're just trying to save a place from being bought out, you need to just give us that more specific sense of what the conflict is in this story and what is sort of the really big obstacle going to be, which is why so many of these have that sense of like, okay, we need to rob, the most heavily guarded casino in the world. That's going to be the basis of the movie, and that's going to take like the entire time to do. In your case, it sounds like you might want to frame it more in terms of like they need this much money by this time. So you say they need to, steal. So what I'm really describing is specifics of conflict. It might be something like we need to steal $1 million by the end of the month in a crazy robbery spree. Something like that would be a good for a logline, or it might be something like they're gonna try to knock over one specific location, or they're gonna try to, like, you might want to just frame it around one of these heists if you don't have a sort of central one, and just give us a clearer sense of what we're gonna be watching these characters actually pull off. A petty thief and his brothers. Also, maybe consider giving us, instead of the, I understand you're saying you're picking a petty thief because that's someone who's going to have trouble raising this much money in this amount of time, so it's going to be difficult for him, but I think you might want to pick an adjective that is more linking your character emotionally to what's going on. If it's like, a thief who used to be a bad guy, but the foster home made him into a good person, maybe we would say something like a repentant thief or a repentant ex-thief must turn back to crime in order to save them. Something like that. It doesn't have to be that, but just something that will make it feel more personal for your main character. Does that make sense? Because petty thief doesn't describe why it matters to him personally.
Yeah, I feel that. Thanks.
Sure. So yeah, loglines are weird like this because it's like there's a lot of loglines that work fine, but we could just choose different words instead to make them a little more evocative, or just hook the audience a little bit more. Almost always personal stakes are going to be more impactful for us than impersonal stakes. So maybe in your logline, try to give us the specifics of the crime spree. Make sure we understand this is going to be a movie about people going on a crime spree. And also, how does this matter to your main character personally? I'm guessing he's doing this because he has a strong connection to that foster home. It's, the parents that raised him made him who he is today, whatever it is. So maybe just emphasize that a little bit more, too. Any questions on this, Paul?
No, thanks.
Sure. All right. So is that everybody? Did I miss anyone? No. All right, so I'll check back at the end for updated ones, but for now, let's go back to slideshow for a little bit, and let's see what we have time to get to. So what are readers looking for in a logline? We want high stakes, and we mean high stakes as it pertains to your genre. High stakes means different things in different genres. In certain genres, the stakes, we expect them to be at a certain level, so think horror or a war film. If you have a war film where the stakes are not life and death, the audience might be a little confused as to what we're really doing. Or a horror film where it's not life and death, it might not feel that dangerous or that interesting because we expect it to be life and death. But it doesn't have to be life and death in every story. I mean, something like, revenge or love or friendship or any of these other things are equally valid stakes as well. And in certain genres might sort of just read as the highest level of what you want to put a character through in that world. So think something like, for comedy, friendship or a relationship are often going to be at the heart of the stakes. Revenge stories that can take place in any genre. Imagine something like, I don't know, your main character is trying to get revenge on someone who has either murdered their family or broken up with them or hurt them in some kind of way. We can all kind of understand the idea of revenge. We also want to have an idea that doesn't feel like it's going to be too big or too small. Too big would be like a 3 to 5 hour epic or a mini series. Too small would be something like a web series or a sketch or a one-act play or a short story or something like that. So movies fall into that middle space where it's basically like a really long short story, if that makes any sense. So 90 minutes to 120 minutes means 90 pages to 120 pages. So your genre or your logline should feel like it can support a story that will take about that amount of time, and I can envision the story within that amount of time. If your story is something like the dynasty of the Song Empire, from its very foundation to the very end of its reign, we're going to follow every major family in that reign in that period of time, then we might be like, that doesn't sound like a movie, that sounds like a TV show or a book series or something like that. So movies are going to hinge around a single protagonist almost all the time. That protagonist-based storytelling is at the heart of 3 acts, or Western-style 3-act movie structure. So framing the entire thing about one person's journey is really key. It's not to say that the movie has to only have one important person in it, or that your main character can't die or something like that. They absolutely can. But if you are following a main character for let's say half the story and then they die halfway through, you have to really know what you're doing. That's like a very advanced technique where the audience will now be like, wait, well, now whose journey is this? Now who am I following? And you have to have a better answer for them. You have to have the knowledge of why you're doing that. You might do something like, you just have to be aware of the effect that it will have on the audience. Because remember, we're usually investing in one person's journey that we are really rooting for that person or really rooting against that person. But it should be one or the other. You can have a villainous main character, absolutely. You can write about a terrible, 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 villainous, awful person. But then the appeal is kind of we're rooting against them. Whether they succeed or not, it's almost irrelevant. You have some movies where the bad person succeeds, like Nightcrawler. We are watching a terrible person get worse and worse, and then he wins, is basically Nightcrawler. People love that movie. You can totally do that. Or it might be something like we're watching a villainous or a bad person, and then they get what's coming to them, and that can sort of be satisfying in its own way to the audience. But just be aware of the effect that these things will have, and the further you drift your focus away from that singular A story of your main character, the more difficult it will be for the audience to remain engaged, unless you've done some masterful ensemble work, which, if you're just starting out, you probably haven't. It's really difficult to write an ensemble story. So, focus on main character. We don't want to go more than a couple scenes without having them involved in a scene. We don't want to drift away from them in the logline. And even if you have a more ensemble-style story, you have, like, a bunch of characters just involved, you want to maybe frame that logline around an A story of some kind in order to give a better sense of how to communicate what this is, what we're getting into. You might say something like Pulp Fiction revolves around this character of Vincent, right? So this guy Vincent, everything else is kind of branching off and blossoming from that into its various places. But if you were pitching Pulp Fiction, I would still say primarily this is Vincent's story. So, what are we just looking for? We're looking for movies that are visual and about people doing stuff, so we want a sense of what your characters are actually doing in the movie, and it should sound like they're doing something that fits into the general expectation of the genre that we are in. If it's like we're doing a comedy about a guy that gets a job at a concentration camp, we're going to be like, where's the humor in this? I'm missing it. But if the second you say something like a guy, like a nerdy bureaucrat who's a pacifist accidentally gets a job at a concentration camp, I could start to see, okay, it's incredibly dark comedy, but maybe we could start to almost see where that would be coming from. So, like, we want to know what we're getting into, what we're going to be watching the protagonist do, and why it's going to fit into its genre that you've told us that it is. We should have primary action that feels like it can be accomplished within the runtime of the story, and that we're going to definitively know when those goals have been accomplished. And that's why we were mentioning earlier this thing of, like, you might want to have some tournament for the characters to win or something. And that is a bit of a cliche, but you can see why so many stories have something like that. It's to add that sense of completion and finality and, like, a climax to a story that otherwise wouldn't really have one. So think of all the coming-of-age teen movies that end with a battle of the bands or something, just to feel like we're finished. We were building up to this, or like a prom. Prom is a really big one. Or like we're working up to that valedictorian speech. And then after that, we graduated. Yay, it's a big party. The movie's over. So those are really nice just to be able to imply the stakes and walls of the story and, like, where is it going? And we should also have a sense of when is this going to be done? That's why you want to avoid things in loglines that are like, he must navigate the complex relationship between these two things. He must learn what it means to be Jewish or Muslim. He must come to understand something. It's like, well, those are all very internal processes that we can't really know that someone has accomplished just from watching a movie about them necessarily. So in terms of your logline, try to focus on that external, tangible journey, and you want to imply the internal journey. We don't need to say he's going to learn this and that. We want to put so like if you have a guy who doesn't respect nature, or, you know, a fracking engineer needs to learn to respect nature. Well, we don't need to say that's going to be in the logline. We need to show us a logline for a story that we feel like, oh, that will support the theme of this guy needs to learn to respect nature. So we want to have a sense of urgency and immediacy. Features really need the sense of urgency more than TV shows do. But we should have an idea of what will happen if the protagonist fails, or why they must do this, why they have to go on this journey in order for, they're still choosing to do it, but they, quote, must, because if they don't, X will happen. What are the stakes? What is the bad thing that will occur if they fail, or if they fail to act? So we like to have an element of the familiar mixed with something fresh and unique. Think of, how do you decide what it is that you're going to watch on TV? Well, I think we all know the genres that we like, so we gravitate towards different stuff. But a really easy way to communicate what something is, or to get someone to watch something, is going to be, say, something like, I don't know, it's like ER, but it's set on a space station. Doesn't that sound kind of cool? It's like, okay, this is going to be a sci-fi medical procedural. That's this thing meets that thing. Very high concept. This meets that are called comps, comparable titles, and you want to be able to choose 2 comps for your movie idea. So you're going to, you can add that to your sketchbook now. Do I have a thing on comps? I think I do. Maybe I could have sworn I saw a slide on comps in here. But comps are a little bit annoying. They are sort of, they feel very 90s in a way to say it's like Die Hard on a jet ski. But at the same time, these are used really frequently. And also, these just, they're really helpful for clarifying what your aims are when it comes to the movie. What kind of thing are you trying to make? Imagine monster movies, for instance. There's a lot of monster movies. They have very different tones. If you're going to be picking one that's really scary and violent and horrible, then you might not want to comp something like, it's like Tremors, because Tremors is pretty lighthearted and humorous, and it's on the funnier end of horror. So your comps are going to help us identify what you're trying to do, and you want to pick 2 comps that are going to give a sense of, it's like this thing meets that thing. ER on a space station. So that might be ER meets, I don't know, Star Trek, something like that. And we like to have a strong hook be highlighted in the logline too. That's going to be that sense of irony, that interesting point of view, or just some variation or mashup of familiar elements that makes it stand out. So here's a few of my loglines. Some of these were for scripts that these are loglines that I didn't write all of them. My managers have written some of these, but these have been the scripts of mine that have been Launchpad Top 10, Nickel Quarterfinal, Nickel Semifinal, set up at major production companies, and have gotten me meetings all over town. So these are my most successful scripts so far. So you can get a sense of, I don't have the genres attached to these, but just from looking at these, you do sort of get a sense of the kind of movie that each of these will be, I would hope. So, we have Nazi besieged Leningrad. Okay, this is going to be like a historical war movie, but about a kid hunting a cannibal. Okay, so we're doing war meets horror. It's a World War II horror film about a kid trying to kill a cannibal. So we have an idea of the antagonist, the main character, and why it's ironic or difficult for a sensitive boy to be the one to have to do this, because that's going to be sort of him coming of age and learning to be less sensitive in a war scenario type of thing. We have other ones as well. You can read these on your own if you want, but these are going to be, even if they aren't following that exact format, I still am trying to answer those questions that we have on our logline template, which is something like the inciting incident, the adjective that describes the main character, so we get a sense of why this person, why this story, and what are they doing in the movie, what is the conflict, what is the appeal, all of these things. Let me stop and take questions on any of these loglines or on any of the stuff about loglines that we've talked about so far, or just questions on anything we've discussed in class today. Oh, Nacho tells me slide 40 is on comps. Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, a quick question. With your log line, let's see.
I can go back to it. Sorry, I just went away from the slide. Let me bring it back up. Where did it go? Sorry, I just had it. The second you click off it, then it becomes impossible. There it is. Okay, so go ahead.
Right, perfect. That hint line.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of like elaborate on that hint line for me?
Sure. So this is the one logline on the sheet. I think that was not written by me. This was written by a manager, hence it being 2 sentences. Whereas mine, I always try to make 1 sentence when possible. But you want me to just break down how this logline is working? Sure. So this one is about a game designer that works at a company in the 90s that had a hint line where you could call in and get someone to walk you through the game, basically. So he becomes the only lifeline to a young assistant who's stranded in a ski lodge with her murderous boss, meaning he's on the phone with her, he's the only one that can save her. Guiding her over the phone, he must use his point-and-click mystery gaming skills to save their lives over the course of one night. So that means basically he's an expert in point-and-click mystery-solving games like Phantasmagoria or Myst or any of those from that era, and he's going to have to sort of tell her what to do like you would control a video game character, right? And over the course of this one night, he's going to have to save her life and get her out of this hotel with this murderer.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you can see that one's a little longer, and I don't recommend writing 2-sentence long ones. It's sort of a complex setup for the idea, but I think previous managers just felt it was worth using that extra sentence just to spell out the uniqueness of this situation. And this is sort of like, it is high concept. It is so high concept as to the point where it almost gets in its own way. It's like, this is a situation that only could have possibly played out in this one specific way, this one specific time, which for movies makes total sense to do, but it sometimes takes a few more words to spell out the essentials of that situation. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, so, for example, you know that guy that used to do those movie trailers, like, In a World.
Oh,
like,
Don LaFontaine is his name, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Is that basically a log line, what he does?
Oh, somebody brought this up recently. Actually, kind of, yeah. Like, in those movies, those old trailers from, like, the 90s to early 2000s, or I guess it was, like, 80s to early 2000s. That was for a long time. Yeah, imagine what those sounded like. In a world where, the streets are run by dangerous gangs, one man, an unassuming man, must rise to the occasion and save the town from these deadly gangsters. You know what I mean? Like, that sort of starts to feel like a log line. It's not that they're not going to be great if you just word for word do something that would be in one of those trailers, but that is a great way to look at it, because those trailers are trying to communicate the premise of the movie as quickly and efficiently as possible. So we're trying to do the same thing. So yeah, that's actually a really great way to think of it.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the questions. Any other questions on these loglines here, or on logline stuff in general, or anything we've talked about up until now?
Yeah, I have a question, Connor. This is Ben.
Hi, go ahead.
So, when I think of comps for my my screenplay, they're about they tell the tone, but they're nothing like the movie. So, can your comps be like that, where they kind of express like what the tone is, or does it have to be, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, sort of, how are you picking the comps? So there's not an exact science to this, and the more you try to assign an exact science to it, the more you'll be like, it's just frustrating. So I like to think of it sometimes this way. It's like the world of the first thing with the tone or the style of the second thing. So imagine we have something like, it's going to be, I'm trying to think of a good example now, but it's the world of, let's say, how about this idea for comps that I did before? So I wrote this in an earlier class, this silly idea for a rom-com called Tango Down, about a special forces soldier that needs to join a dance contest, right? So the idea for that, it would be, the comps might be something like, it's the world of this meets the tone or style or approach of that. So this might be something like Rainbow Six, or Tom Clancy meets Silver Linings Playbook, right? So it's like world of the first thing, approach of the second thing. You can try it that way. And that's how I like to think of it. Can you give your examples of your comps, and maybe I can just give you feedback on the comps themselves? Go ahead.
So like the two comps that come to my mind are Bad News Bears and Old School.
Okay.
So like those are the two comps that like kind of like the tone of what I'm trying to do with the free running.
So in Bad News Bears, the idea is that the main character, I believe, is the coach of a kind of baseball team full of losers, right?
Right.
So does your movie have a similar sense of he needs to coordinate this group of kids, or parkour runners, and he needs to they're like a bunch of underdogs? Is that the kind of vibe that it has?
Well, I saw Brand News Bears as the old and the new, and how they helped each other, right? So like they started to understand one another. And so that's kind of more of the dynamic that I see between the old guy and the free runners, like where they learn from each other, right? And they come together and to be happy in the end, basically.
Sure, I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's throwing people way off. It might make people think, oh, so this is going to be about are they kid characters? Yeah. It might throw people off just a tiny bit, but I think we mostly get the idea from your comps. I would think. Have you seen the movie Run, Fat Boy, Run with Simon Pegg?
No, I haven't.
Check it out for sure. It's about sort of like lazy middle-aged guy who, I believe, his fiance or his partner is leaving him or is breaking up with him because he's so lazy. So he decides to prove his worth to her and win her back and his kids respect back by winning a marathon. Yeah. It's really good, actually. Okay. And that might be a good comp. I'm not sure if people know that movie really, but that came out in like probably 2012 or 2013, and that might be a nice one to choose. Yeah, check that out. And if not, yeah, I think your comps sound pretty fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other questions? So we have 10 minutes left. Does anyone have an updated logline besides Josh? Okay, I want to go for 5 more minutes on slides and then look at updated loglines. Maybe just Josh, but that's okay. So what else do we have to cover? I mean, this is like I could show some examples of good loglines. I think that's probably something I don't do enough. Let's look at this really nice one from the 2019 hit list. This is a horror drama by Colin Bannon. This one is in 2 sentences, and most of the time we don't want to do that. And most of the time we don't want to include character names. They're just not relevant for us. This is from a list, and list loglines tend to not be written by the writer, but by their management. So don't take this as like you need to write something in exactly this format. But this one just answers all of those questions and just hooks you and is just really intriguing. It has a great sense of the world and the conflict and the scope and the time frame. It really blooms in the mind. And like as a fan of this genre who's seen a million horror dramas, I'm excited to read this movie. I've not yet read it, but I'm like, I would definitely read that just from reading these sentences here. So let's check it out. Hurricane holdout, Julie Mills, again, don't include names in yours. A hurricane holdout, or we might say a widowed hurricane holdout, who lost her husband 2 years ago, refuses to evacuate from her dream home during the most dangerous storm in a decade. As the storm worsens, Julie must defend her home against Mother Nature, a band of looters, and something much more sinister that arrives with the hurricane. So this is a bit coy and a bit vague, but you can be that way if every other element is in place. This is a horror drama, so by including those earlier details, as a big fan of this genre, I happen to know that her losing her husband 2 years ago is almost certainly connected with this sort of supernatural, sinister thing that arrives with the hurricane. I'm guessing it's a ghost or an evil god or something like that, I guess. But we get the idea. We get that it's connected with the sinister things somehow. And because we have such great specificity of that character, the time frame, and the sort of world of this, which is, this is going to take place in a house during a really bad hurricane outside, as we're following this lady trying to keep herself and her possessions safe. And we have an idea of what those threats are going to be. The storm itself, a band of looters as well, and also this supernatural other threat that we don't get that much info on, but we understand, that's part of the mystery of the movie, is figuring out what that thing will be. So I just really like this logline, and the goal, if nothing else, is just to have somebody say, I would read that. I'm excited to read that, just from hearing the pitch for it. We have a question in the chat. Am I able to watch this later? Yeah, you can watch this on YouTube. This is being live streamed to YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and here on Discord, so you can immediately rewind or watch the stream over and check back on this later. Okay, so that's a really great example of a logline. Any last questions on this? Things to include in loglines, or what makes a good logline or a bad one, or anything like that? Okay, if there's no questions, I think I will look at the updated logline from Josh, and then we will look at what's due for next week, what to expect for the upcoming course, and what to be thinking about and working on for the near future. Okay, so Josh, should we look at your updated logline?
Sure, I'll just put it in the chat.
Okay.
I reworked the concept to be that they are in a world where these characters all exist already, and that it is a known quantity. And so my new reworked concept for the time being is, after moving into a gated community, a good-natured family man discovers his new neighborhood is a so-called horror character retirement community, must convince his family they are not safe before it's too late.
Okay, so a horror character retirement community.
So they're all, I don't kill anymore, I don't hunt anymore, I don't do these things anymore. And it's kind of explained to them when they move in that this is the situation. and that you have no need to worry. But there's, he's convinced that there's something to be worried about, and
I like this.
his,
This is quite nice. Go ahead.
yeah, and his family are, Dracula's charming, so on and so forth. His family is entranced by this kind of exotic neighborhood that they've found themselves in, and he's just like, no, we're dead. I have to prove that they're killing people, that they're enslaving people, that they're doing all this stuff.
So really, it sounds less like the entire goal of the movie is this isn't a drama about him just again and again trying to convince his family that they're evil, but he has to expose the monsters, right? Or expose the fact that they are evil.
Yes.
Okay, so he has to expose their sinister plan. So maybe it's something like the family is even almost... Are they okay with living with the monsters at first?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So in that case, I think the movie is about him investigating and then having to prove that he's right about these guys having sinister plans for the family. So I would just rethink the description of the logline around those terms, but I like the way that you've rethought this, and I totally get the fact that now this takes place in a kind of cartoony comedy world where, Dracula and the Wolfman and stuff can just live in a neighborhood and everyone knows who they are, and are they like celebrities?
It could be. I mean, it's yeah, I don't know yet.
Maybe we're thinking of, because if this is a gated community and everyone knows who they are, my thought would be that they have to have some level of societal acceptance or respect. Otherwise, they would be living in some very secluded, well, I mean, I assume it is secluded, but something that you probably wouldn't describe as a gated community. So that's my thought, that maybe they're kind of like famous. And they sort of behave like retired Hollywood celebrities might behave. You could think of that. Just some suggestions or ideas for you. But I like this a lot. I think that maybe just make those little changes, and you should have a really strong logline here.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thank you. All right. So, anyone else have an updated logline for us to look at? Oh, Jay has one. Thanks, Jay. You want to read this new one for us?
Sure. Shiner, Texas, a small unknown town with population 2,100, gets a world-famous water park. Our rival town, Dreyer, has to go to Shiner in order to go to the world-famous water park. Logan Winters, a 12-year-old kid, and his crew must find the rumored journal that initiated the rivalry in order to save the water park.
Okay, how will finding a journal...
Is that too long?
It is a little long. We want to just do... Yeah, it is too wordy and too long. We want to just try to make this one sentence, and again, we don't need to include the character name, so don't... Because we won't remember the character name from just the logline, so don't worry about that. But let me just ask you, why will finding a journal end the rivalry? Or why will it save the park?
The backstory is these... Matt and Paul, their brothers, they were the son of the mayor of the town. When their dad died, they both wanted to be mayor. So one of the brothers ended up punching the other brother in his eye, and they basically kicked him out of town. So he created his own town, and he named it Shiner for like a mockery for punching his brother in the eye. And his brother named the town Dreyer, and he became the mayor. So there's like some journal about what actually happened, because no one knows what really happened that started the rivalry. So if they can find that journal, they can hopefully stop this war.
So if they find the journal, people will see that was the initial conflict like a misunderstanding or something?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So is this like a mystery style movie where you have the main character trying to follow a series of clues to find this little journal artifact kind of thing?
No, kind of like it's a group of kids. Basically, you can say that, but it's not necessarily a mystery. It becomes kind of like a mystery at the end, and the beginning is just completely fun.
So I guess I'm wondering about the focus of the story now. I thought I had a pretty clear idea of it before, but now that we have added this goalpost of it's about a kid trying to hunt down this journal, I'm starting to think, is this more like kind of like a Stranger Things kind of vibe to it?
So when you said the main character, I need to put a must in the log line. Originally, this wasn't it, but I put this in here to complete the log line, if that make any sense.
Sure. So you're trying to find a goal, find a direction for the character to go in that we understand. Once he finishes this, then the journey of the movie is over. I totally understand that. It's just starting to make me think this is more of like I was thinking originally that this would be sort of like almost like a teen comedy, and now that you're phrasing it's about a kid with his group of friends who are trying to hunt down an artifact that's going to end this rivalry, it's starting to feel a little more like Goonies or Stranger Things or something like that, which is also okay, but you just want to make sure that you are creating like a cohesive picture of what the movie will be. And trying to rearrange it into one sentence, I think will start to clarify stuff like this. So let me just give you a suggestion. Something like, when a new water park ignites tensions, or I'll say something like, with their neighboring rival town, adjective 12-year-old, or we could say boy, perhaps, must do X conflict to end the rivalry, or to end the battle between these towns before his community falls apart. Something like that. So if we're going to phrase it along the lines of finding this journal is going to be the sort of main goal for the main character, might say something like must how would we phrase this? Recover a. See, the thing is, we want it to make sense within the context of the logline and not need any more backstory for it to make sense. And on its own, saying something like he needs to find this journal to reveal this secret that I need to then explain the backstory of the town in order to get it to make sense, just makes it tricky and a little bit cumbersome in a logline right now. If you're still wondering what to kind of do with the story, you're trying to figure out a goal, that's totally fine. You don't need to know the answer. You don't need to know all the answers immediately. But these are just things to think about. And we just want to be clear why this would work. Why would this work? And if it turns out that it would take too many words to explain why finding a journal and exposing the history of the town would cause people to stop fighting over going to a water park, if you can find a way to explain and clarify that in the logline, then you should. But if it's too complicated, you might just need to find a different goal for the character.
Okay. I almost did. So there's nothing set in stone. The reason I added that is just to see if I could do a completed log line.
Sure, yeah, no problem. It doesn't have to be totally done or totally perfect right now, and you got to just try stuff sometimes to see what works and see what doesn't. So keep thinking about this journal idea. If you want to rework the log line around that, then work on that this week and just try to present one sentence that clarifies, oh, I totally see why him finding that journal would do that. If you're not set on that one goal, then maybe think, what are some other goals that I could use for the main character? What are some other finish lines that this story could use? So it might be something like, this is where in comedy it's so common to have that battle of the bands, or to have that sort of like there's a contest, there's a tournament, there's something like that we need to or a fundraiser, we need to raise this much money in order to build another water park by the end of summer, or else this conflict will cause his whole family, like, I don't know, you said he has some family in the other town, so I could see how the conflict between the people in these two places will just cause lots of social fallout and social damage in the town as it is. So maybe look for other goalposts. Does he need to raise this much money by this time? Does he need to win this contest? Does he need to organize his town does he need to broker a peace between them? Does he need to negotiate a peace? look for that central relationship, and I think you might start to find it there.
Okay, most definitely. Thank you.
Thanks for this. So yeah, just broad note to everybody, especially for comedy and drama writers, central relationship will almost always clarify what the movie is. Okie doke, that brings us to the end of our time for today. Thank you so much to everyone who shared today. I'm actually really looking forward to hearing more about many of these. We have a question in the chat. The why will this work has to be in the logline. Well, I think we should understand why your main character is going on their quest and what it is that they're actually doing, is just to clarify to you, Trisha. So for instance, like if we're saying when all of Middle-earth is threatened by an evil dark god, a little hobbit has to take that dark god's magic ring and destroy it before the dark god gets it, because if he gets it, he'll be able to end the world. So then we have a sense of, okay, why are we watching the character go on this journey? Why will accomplishing this actually achieve his aims? Thank you, Ben, and thank you for coming, everybody. We will let's look at what to do for next week, and then we will send you all off and tell you have a nice weekend. But so for next time, you want to refine that logline. If you got feedback on it today, use that feedback and try to write a stronger version about it. You want to use that logline as a compass and as a guidepost to help fill out that sketchbook. So that sketchbook, remember, everything goes in here. You don't have to check this, or you don't have to turn this in for a grade or anything, but this is just for you to get all those ideas down, get those ideas out. If you're still brainstorming, what could the goal be for the character? Where could this be going? What is the ending going to be? What am I building towards? Sketchbook is the perfect place to do that. Your other assignment, besides work on the sketchbook and finalize logline, is read a full original spec feature from the Blacklist, ideally in the same genre as your pilot, but it doesn't have to be, by next week. So we have many, many, many scripts in these Blacklists for you to choose from, and you should be reading ideally 3 of these every single week. We're going to leave a link in the chat where you can download all of these, and click on that link, that drive link there, and you can go up to the last 10 years of the top kind of spec scripts in Hollywood. So try to pick one for a movie you haven't seen before, and you just need to get into the habit of reading scripts. I'm going to check every single week to ask, what scripts have you read recently? There's absolutely no way to become a screenwriter unless you religiously start reading scripts and taking notes on things that are working and not working and paying a lot of attention. So get reading, fill out the sketchbook, finalize loglines. Let's take questions before we wrap up. Any last questions? Go ahead, Nacho.
Just be sure to vote yes in the poll so you can join the bootcamp channels and get access, get help with your log lines. And, you know, if you're planning to do this and write a script in 8 weeks, be sure to hit the button in the poll. Just vote yes, and you can get immediate access.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, scriptcamp.net/membership would be where you sign up for that free trial for 2 weeks of unlimited classes, workshops, and whatever you want here on Scriptcamp. Let's open to questions, and then we'll wrap up. Any last questions? All right, if there's no more questions, then we will see you guys soon. There's table reads later today at 2 o'clock, I believe. Is Gray here? There's table reads today, perhaps? Oh, no, she's left already. So make sure to just stay tuned to our announcements channel, and you can see everything that's coming up. Normally we have table read Sundays, we have script swap Tuesdays, plenty of things to do and events here, so we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your weekend.